She signed the divorce papers smiling. Not polite. Not nervous. Smiling. Jiwoo Park looked across the polished mahogany table at her husband and said casually, "My lawyer says I'll get half. You'll be fine though. You're resilient." The lawyer paused mid-page. Her pen hovered. She looked at Jiwoo, then at Daniel, then back at the papers. "Ma'am," the lawyer said slowly, "did you ever check whose name was on anything?" Jiwoo's smile didn't falter. "Everything we built together is ours. That's how marriage works." Daniel said nothing. He just sat there, hands folded, eyes calm. The lawyer glanced at him, then closed the folder. "We'll see about that." Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, welcome to the family. We tell stories that hit different, stories that make you think twice about what you assume. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what happens next. I remember the first time I realized Daniel wasn't like other men I dated. It was our third date. We were at a coffee shop in Silver Spring, Maryland. I talked about my promotion, my bonus, my corner office. He listened, smiled, congratulated me, then went back to his tea. No competition, no posturing, no need to one-up me. I thought it was refreshing. Later, I'd call it weakness. Daniel Okafor was Nigerian-American, born in Houston, raised between two worlds. His parents were engineers who taught him discipline, planning, and silence. "Never announce your moves," his father used to say. Daniel took it to heart. He worked in tech cloud infrastructure, back-end systems, things most people didn't understand. He dressed plain, drove a 2015 Honda Accord even after his second promotion, lived in a modest apartment in Silver Spring while his salary climbed. His friends called him the monk. Jiwoo's friends called him underwhelming. Jiwoo was different. Korean-American, born in Los Angeles, raised to win. Her parents owned a dry cleaning business and a small commercial property. They worked 70-hour weeks so she could go to Georgetown. She graduated with honors, landed a marketing role at a mid-sized firm, climbed fast. By 32, she was a senior director. She wore designer blazers, drove a leased BMW, lived like she'd already made it. Her friends admired her. Her parents were proud. And Daniel? He was just there. They married in the spring of 2019. Small ceremony. Immediate family only. Jiwoo's mother asked her privately, "Are you sure? He seems quiet." Jiwoo laughed. "That's what I like about him, Mom. He's stable." Her mother didn't look convinced. "Stable is good, but stable doesn't build empires." Jiwoo kissed her cheek. "I'll build the empire. He'll hold it down." Her mother said nothing, but her eyes said everything. The first year was smooth. They rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Bethesda. Split bills. Shared chores. Laughed over takeout. Daniel worked remotely most days. Jiwoo traveled for client pitches. When she came home tired, he had dinner ready. When she vented about office politics, he listened. "You're too nice," she said one night. He looked up from his laptop. "Is that a bad thing?" She shrugged. "Not bad. Just soft." He smiled. "I'll take that." But over time, something shifted. Jiwoo started making more money. A lot more. Her bonuses doubled. Her title changed. She was invited to speak on panels, featured in marketing newsletters. Daniel's career grew too quietly. No fanfare. No LinkedIn posts. Just raises. Stock options. Back-end progress. But Jiwoo didn't see it. She saw a man who didn't brag. And to her, that meant he had nothing to brag about. By their third year, respect had turned into something else. Jiwoo stopped asking Daniel about his day. She stopped waiting for him at dinner. She'd come home late, drop her bag, and head straight to the bedroom. "Long day?" he'd ask. Yeah, that was it. No details. No connection. Just tired eyes and a closed door. Daniel noticed, but he didn't push. He'd learned early that Jiwoo needed space when she was stressed. What he didn't know was that the stress wasn't from work. It was from him. Her friends started asking questions. "How's Daniel?" her college roommate Sarah asked over brunch. Jiwoo shrugged. "He's fine, same as always." "Still in tech?" "Yeah." "Is he Moving up? Jiwoo cut into her eggs. He doesn't really talk about it. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's weird. My husband won't shut up about his promotions. Jiwoo forced a smile. Daniel's humble. Sarah sipped her mimosa. Humble or stagnant? The question hung in the air. Jiwoo didn't answer. The argument started small. Why don't you ever talk about work? Jiwoo asked one night. Daniel looked up from his book. You never ask. I shouldn't have to ask. Normal people share. He closed the book. I'm here every night. I listen to everything you say. If you want to know something, just ask. She crossed her arms. That's not the point. Then what is? She exhaled hard. You're too comfortable, Daniel. You don't push. You don't fight. You just exist. He stared at her. And that's a problem? Yes, she said. It is. I started resenting him. I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. Every time I paid for dinner, I felt it. Every time I booked a trip and covered most of it, I felt it. Every time someone asked what Daniel did and I had to say tech with no real details, I felt small. Like I'd married potential and got comfortable instead. My mother's words echoed. Stable doesn't build empires. I wanted more than stable. I wanted a partner who matched my energy. Not someone who just watched me burn. Daniel felt it too. The distance. The coldness. The way Jiwoo looked at him now like he was an obligation. One evening, he tried. Do you want to go away this weekend? Just us. No work. Jiwoo didn't look up from her laptop. I have a pitch Monday. You always have a pitch. She finally looked at him. And you always have nothing. The words landed like a slap. Daniel stood there for a moment. Then he nodded. All right. He walked into the bedroom and closed the door quietly. Jiwoo stared at her screen. She didn't apologize. Months passed. They lived like roommates. Polite. Functional. Empty. Jiwoo stayed later at work. Daniel traveled more for his job trips he never mentioned. They stopped sleeping in the same bed. He took the guest room. She didn't ask why. On their 5th anniversary, they sat across from each other at a restaurant. No gifts. No romance. Just two people going through motions. Do you still love me? Daniel asked. Jiwoo looked at him. Really looked? I don't know, she said honestly. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. 2 months later, Jiwoo made her decision. She sat Daniel down after work. No preamble. No cushion. I think we should end this while we're still civil, she said. Daniel didn't flinch. He just looked at her. If that's what you want. She expected resistance. Tears. Bargaining. Instead, he asked calmly, Do you already have a lawyer? Her lips curved. Just slightly. I do. He nodded. Then I'll get one too. She felt relief. This was going to be easy. Clean. She'd take half, start fresh, and finally live the life she deserved. Without dead weight. Jiwoo walked into her lawyer's office feeling lighter than she had in months. The office was sleek, glass walls, modern art, leather chairs. Her attorney, Margaret Chen, was a shark in Prada heels. So, Margaret said, pulling out a legal pad, let's talk assets. Jiwoo leaned forward. We've been married 5 years. I make more. I paid for most things, but legally it's 50-50, right? Margaret nodded. In Maryland, yes, marital property gets divided equitably. What do we have? Jiwoo started listing. The house in Bethesda. My car, obviously mine. His car, whatever. Our joint savings account, his retirement account, and whatever equity he has in his company. Margaret wrote quickly. Do you know how much is in his retirement? Jiwoo paused. No. But it can't be much. He's not exactly a go-getter. Margaret looked up. You'd be surprised. Tech jobs have good benefits. Jiwoo smiled. Even better for me. If you're enjoying this story, take 1 minute and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Daniel sat in a different office across town. Smaller. Quieter. His lawyer was an older black man named Richard Mbeki, a fellow Nigerian-American who'd built a reputation handling quiet wealth. Daniel, Richard said, setting down his pen, I've reviewed everything you sent me. Before we proceed, I need to ask, does she know? Daniel shook his head. She never asked. Richard leaned back. Never asked about the house? The LLC? The trust? Never. Richard whistled low. Son, you married a woman who assumed you were broke. Daniel's jaw tightened. She married a man she thought she'd have to carry. Richard smiled. Well, she's about to learn otherwise. The house in Bethesda was beautiful. 4 bedrooms. Modern kitchen. Backyard with a deck. Jiwoo had fallen in love with it immediately. This is the one, she'd said, walking through the empty living room. Daniel had looked around quietly. It's nice. Nice? It's perfect. Can we afford it? He'd nodded. We can. She assumed we meant her salary and his combined. What she didn't know was that Daniel had purchased the house outright, before they got married, then added her name for tax purposes after the wedding. But the deed? That told a different story, one she'd never read. Margaret scheduled the first official meeting. Both parties. Both lawyers. A conference room downtown. Jiwoo arrived early, dressed sharp black pantsuit, red lipstick, hair pulled back. She looked like she was closing a deal. Because she was... Daniel arrived exactly on time. Gray slacks. White shirt. No tie. He looked the same as always. Unremarkable. Jiwoo almost felt bad. Almost. Shall we begin? Margaret said. Richard opened his briefcase. Let's. Margaret started. We're seeking equitable distribution of all marital assets. That includes the marital home, joint accounts, retirement funds, and any business interests acquired during the marriage. Richard didn't look up from his notes. Noted. Margaret continued. My client has also been the primary financial contributor to the household. She paid for 70% of living expenses, vacations, and home improvements. Jiwoo nodded along. Richard finally looked up. Also noted. However, there's a small issue. Margaret frowned. Which is? Richard slid a folder across the table. Mr. Okafor's assets are not subject to division. The room went silent. Jiwoo's smile faded. Excuse me? Margaret opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Her expression shifted. Jiwoo leaned forward. What is it? Margaret read aloud slowly. The property at 4527 Brookside Drive was purchased by Daniel Okafor on the 14th of March 2019, sole owner. Deed registered under his name. Prenuptial classification. Separate property. Jiwoo blinked. That's our house. No, Richard said calmly. That's his house. You were added as a resident for tax filing purposes, not as an owner. Jiwoo's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Margaret flipped to the next page. And this? Richard answered. Equity in Next Point Solutions. Mr. Okafor was granted stock options in 2017. They vested in 2018. Also premarital. I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew was collapsing. The house I decorated? His. The equity I assumed we'd split? His. Margaret kept reading. Real estate holdings under Okafor Property Holdings LLC? Richard nodded. 3 rental properties in Silver Spring and 1 in Baltimore, all purchased before marriage, managed through a family trust. I finally found my voice. You're telling me he's been wealthy this whole time? Richard looked at me. I'm telling you he's been prepared. Daniel said nothing. He just sat there, watching me fall apart. Margaret regrouped quickly. She was a professional. All right, premarital assets are separate. What about income earned during the marriage? Richard pulled out another document. Mr. Okafor's salary during the marriage was deposited into a separate account. He contributed a fixed monthly amount to the joint account for household expenses as agreed upon verbally by both parties. Margaret's eyes narrowed. How much? $3,000 a month. Jiwoo's head snapped up. That's it? I was putting in 6. Richard didn't blink. Because you insisted on maintaining a certain lifestyle. Mr. Okafor lived within the agreed budget. The additional expenses were your choice. Margaret shuffled papers. What about the joint savings account? $17,000. We're happy to split that. Jiwoo laughed bitterly. $8,500. That's what I get? Richard's expression didn't change. That's what's marital. Jiwoo stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly. This is insane. We were married for 5 years. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. And in those 5 years, you never once asked me about my finances. She whirled on him. Because I thought we were partners. Partners ask questions, he said. Partners communicate. You assumed I had nothing because I didn't perform for you. Her face flushed. I didn't assume. You did. Daniel interrupted. Every time you paid for something, you held it over my head. Every time your friends asked about me, you looked embarrassed. You married me thinking I needed you. His eyes met hers. I didn't. Margaret tried to recover the situation. All right, let's talk about alimony. My client left her career trajectory unaffected, but there's still the matter of… Richard cut her off. No alimony. Both parties maintained their careers independently. No one sacrificed earning potential. No one was a dependent. Margaret's jaw clenched. She contributed more to the household. By her own choice. Mr. Okafor never requested a higher standard of living. Those decisions were unilateral. Jiwoo sank back into her chair. So I get nothing. Richard's voice softened slightly. You get what you brought into the marriage. Your car, your retirement account, your salary, your independence. He paused. Which, if I recall, was what you valued most. The meeting ended. No shouting. No drama. Just the sound of papers being packed away. Jiwoo walked out first. Margaret followed, heels clicking sharply. In the elevator, Jiwoo finally broke. How did I not see this? Margaret Seahill. People see what they want to see. You saw a quiet man who didn't boast. You assumed that meant he had nothing to boast about. He lied to me. No, Margaret corrected. He just never corrected your assumptions. Legally, there's a difference. The elevator doors opened. Jiwoo stepped out into the parking garage. The luxury sedan she'd leased suddenly felt ridiculous. Everything felt ridiculous. Daniel and Richard walked out together. You all right? Richard asked. Daniel nodded slowly. I didn't want it to go this way. What way did you want? Daniel stopped at his car, the same old Honda. I wanted her to love me for who I was, not what she thought I could become. Richard put a hand on his shoulder. Some people only respect what they can see. You were never going to win with her. Daniel unlocked his car. I know, that's why I prepared. Richard smiled. Your father taught you well. Daniel got in. He taught me to protect myself. Even from people I love. He started the engine. Especially from them. That night, Jiwoo sat in her apartment. The same apartment they'd shared. Daniel had already moved out. Quietly. While she was at work. He'd taken his clothes, his books, his laptop. Left everything else. The furniture. The kitchen supplies. Even the framed photos. She walked through the empty rooms. Each one echoed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. How'd it go? You taking him to the cleaners? Jiwoo stared at the message. Then typed slowly. There was nothing to clean. She hit send. Then turned off her phone. I replayed everything in my head. Every conversation. Every assumption. Every time I dismissed him. He'd never lied. Never pretended to be broke. I just decided he was. Because he drove an old car. Because he didn't brag. Because he didn't perform wealth the way I expected. And now? Now I was the one left with nothing. Not because he took anything from me, but because I'd never built anything that was actually mine. I'd been so busy looking down on him, I never looked at myself. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Jiwoo's life looked different. She'd moved to a smaller apartment in Rockville. 1 bedroom. No view. Cheaper rent. Her BMW lease was up, so she bought a used Toyota. Practical. Invisible. The kind of car Daniel would have driven. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her friends stopped calling as much. The group chats went quiet when she stopped posting about luxury brunches and weekend getaways. Success has a lot of fans. Humility has none. Sarah texted once. You doing okay? Jiwoo typed and deleted 3 responses. Finally settled on, I'm fine. She wasn't. Work became her refuge. Jiwoo threw herself into campaigns, pitches, late nights at the office. But something had changed there too. Her confidence was shaken. In meetings, she second-guessed herself. When presenting to clients, her voice wavered. Her boss noticed. Jiwoo, can we talk? They sat in his office. Your performance has been off lately. The Henderson pitch you used to close those in your sleep. She nodded. I know. I'm working on it. Is everything all right? Personal issues? She forced a smile. Just going through a divorce. I'll bounce back. He leaned back. Take the time you need. But we need the old Jiwoo back. She left his office wondering if that person still existed. Daniel, meanwhile, was thriving. Not publicly. Never publicly. But his life was expanding in quiet ways. The startup he'd held equity in got acquired. His shares were worth $1.3 million. He didn't post about it. Didn't celebrate loudly. Just deposited the check and called his financial advisor. Put it into the trust. Same structure as before. His advisor laughed. Daniel, you could buy something nice. Celebrate a little. Daniel looked out his new apartment window. I have everything I need. What about a new car? That Honda's ancient. It runs fine. The advisor sighed. You're the only millionaire I know who lives like a grad student. That's why I'm a millionaire. One Saturday, Jiwoo ran into Daniel's cousin at Whole Foods. Chioma. They'd been friendly during the marriage. Jiwoo. Chioma's face was warm but cautious. Hey, Chioma. Awkward silence. How are you? Chioma asked. I'm good. You? Good. I heard about everything. I'm sorry. Jiwoo shifted her grocery basket. It's fine. It was time. Chioma nodded slowly. Can I ask you something? Sure. Did you ever ask Daniel about his family? Jiwoo frowned. What do you mean? Chioma chose her words carefully. His father was a petroleum engineer. His mother was a hospital administrator. They didn't just teach him discipline. They taught him generational wealth. Jiwoo's stomach dropped. I didn't know. I know, Chioma said gently. That was the problem. That conversation haunted Jiwoo for days. She'd never asked about his family beyond surface details. Never asked about his childhood, his parents' careers, their values. She'd been so focused on what he wasn't doing. She never looked at where he came from. One night, she broke down and searched for him online. His LinkedIn was sparse, but there were mentions. An article about NextPoint Solutions acquisition. Daniel's name listed as an early technical advisor and equity holder. Another article about affordable housing initiatives. Okafor Property Holdings LLC mentioned as a donor. A photo from a tech conference. Daniel on a panel about sustainable growth. She'd been married to him for 5 years. And she'd never seen any of this. Because she'd never looked. I spent weeks angry. Angry at Daniel for not telling me. Angry at myself for not asking. Angry at the world for making me look like a fool. But slowly, the anger turned into something else. Clarity. I'd treated marriage like a competition. Like something I could win. I kept score of every dollar, every contribution, every sacrifice. And in doing that, I'd missed the entire point. Partnership isn't about what you bring to the table. It's about whether you even bother to sit down and eat together. We never did. I was too busy counting plates. 6 months after the divorce, Jiwoo got an unexpected call. Miss Park? This is Richard Mbeke, Daniel Okafor's attorney. Her heart stopped. Yes? I'm calling on behalf of my client. There's a matter concerning the Bethesda property. Jiwoo's voice tightened. What about it? Mr. Okafor is selling the house. As a former resident, you have 30 days to remove any remaining personal items. She'd forgotten about the boxes in the garage. Old photos, college textbooks, things she'd meant to sort through. I'll come by this week. There's one more thing, Richard said. What? Mr. Okafor wanted you to know that any furniture or household items you want, you're welcome to take. He kept them for you. Jiwoo's throat burned. Tell him thank you. I will. The words came slowly. I'm sorry. Daniel's expression didn't change. For what? For everything. For how I treated you. For assuming you were less than you were. For never asking. For keeping score. She swallowed hard. You deserved better than that. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I appreciate you saying that. Do you forgive me? She asked. He considered the question. I don't think forgiveness is the issue. We wanted different things. You wanted someone who matched your energy, your visibility. I wanted someone who saw me without needing proof. He looked at her directly. We both failed each other, just in different ways. Jiwoo's eyes burned. I saw you. I saw you wrong. I know. The house felt hollow. Most of the furniture was gone. Just basics remained: the couch, the dining table, some lamps. I packed your things from the garage, Daniel said, gesturing to boxes by the door. And I labeled what's yours from the house. Jiwoo looked at the neat stack. Everything organized. Of course it was. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to, he said. Make it easier. She walked through the living room. Their wedding photo was gone from the mantel, replaced by nothing. When do you close? She asked. 2 weeks. Buyers paying cash. Good market. Yeah. The small talk felt suffocating. Jiwoo turned to face him. Daniel, I need to say something. He waited. Jiwoo drove to the Bethesda house on a Thursday afternoon. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The neighborhood looked the same. Tree-lined streets. Perfect lawns. Children playing. She pulled into the driveway. Daniel's Honda was parked there. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected him to be there. The front door opened before she could knock. Daniel stood in the doorway. Same quiet presence. Same calm eyes. Hi, he said simply. Hi. They stood there for a moment. Then he stepped aside. Come in. They loaded the boxes into Jiwoo's car together, working in silence. Comfortable silence for the first time in years. When the last box was packed, Jiwoo closed the trunk. Can I ask you something? She said. Go ahead. Why didn't you ever tell me? About the money, the investments, all of it? Daniel leaned against the car. Because I wanted to know if you'd love me without it. My whole life, people saw my last name, my parents' success, and made assumptions. When I met you, you didn't know any of that. You just knew me. He paused. Or at least I thought you did. But I made different assumptions, Jiwoo said quietly. You did. You assumed quiet meant weak, humble meant poor. And I let you, because I wanted to see if you'd choose me anyway. His voice was sad but not bitter. You didn't. Jiwoo got into her car, started the engine, then stopped. She rolled down the window. Daniel? He turned back. You're going to make someone very happy someday. Someone who sees you clearly. He smiled slightly. So will you. Once you figure out what you're actually looking for. She nodded, pulled out of the driveway. In her rearview mirror, she watched him standing there, not waving, just watching her go, the way he'd watched everything, quietly, patiently, without fanfare. She finally understood what she'd lost. And it wasn't the house. 1 year later, Jiwoo sat in a coffee shop in Silver Spring, the same one where she and Daniel had their third date. She'd changed, not dramatically, but fundamentally, she drove a sensible car, lived within her means, stopped performing on social media. Her friend count had dropped, but the ones who remained were real. She'd been promoted at work, not because she was the loudest, but because she'd learned to listen, to ask questions, to stop assuming she knew everything. Her therapist called it growth. Jiwoo called it expensive lessons. Across the coffee shop, a couple laughed together. The woman was animated, successful looking. The man was quiet, smiling, listening. Jiwoo watched them and hoped the woman saw what she'd been blind to. Daniel stood in front of a classroom. Not his usual environment, but he'd been invited to speak at Howard University's business school. Building Wealth in Silence was the lecture title. 50 students watched him. Most of you have been taught that success should be loud, he began. That if you're not posting, announcing, celebrating publicly, you're not really winning. He clicked to the next slide. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. The wealthiest people I know are the quietest. They're not hiding, they're just not performing. A student raised her hand. But don't people need to see your success to respect you? Daniel smiled. If someone only respects what they can see, their respect isn't worth having. He paused. Build your foundation in private. Let your life speak for itself. The students took notes. Some got it. Some didn't. That was okay. The ones who needed to hear it, heard it. After the lecture, a young woman approached Daniel. Professor Okafor. Just Daniel, I'm not a professor. She smiled. Daniel. That was really powerful. Can I ask, do you ever regret being so private? Like, did it cost you anything? Daniel thought about Jiwoo, about the years they'd lost, about the love that could have been if circumstances were different. It cost me a relationship once, he said honestly. Someone I cared about deeply. She needed visibility. I needed acceptance. We couldn't give each other what we needed. Do you think you should have changed? He shook his head. No. Because changing would have meant becoming someone I'm not. And that's a bigger loss than any relationship. The student nodded slowly. Thank you. I needed to hear that. Anytime. That evening, Daniel sat in his apartment. Still modest. Still minimal. Still him. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Your father and I saw your lecture online. We're proud of you. He smiled. Typed back. Learned from the best. 3 dots appeared. Then, we also heard about the divorce settlement. You handled it with dignity. That's worth more than money. Daniel stared at that message. Worth more than money. His parents had taught him that wealth wasn't just about accumulation. It was about protection. About knowing your value even when others didn't. About walking away whole when others wanted to take pieces of you. He'd lost a wife, but he'd kept himself. That was the real victory. 6 months after that, Jiwoo was at a networking event. She'd learned to hate these. Too much posturing. But her boss insisted. She was talking to a potential client when she saw him. Across the room, Daniel. He was with a woman. Tall. Natural beauty. They were laughing. Jiwoo's chest tightened. Not with jealousy. With something else. Recognition. The woman looked at Daniel the way Jiwoo should have. With admiration. With interest. With eyes that actually saw him. Daniel glanced up and caught Jiwoo's eye. He nodded. A small acknowledgement. No malice. No pain. Just recognition that they'd both moved on. Jiwoo nodded back. And meant it. I left the event early. Not because seeing Daniel hurt, but because it clarified something. I'd spent so long thinking I deserved better than him. When the truth was simpler, I didn't deserve him at all. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I never learned to see value in stillness, in patience, in people who build empires so quietly you don't hear the construction. Daniel taught me that silence isn't emptiness. Sometimes it's fullness you're not equipped to hear. I'm learning to listen now. To myself. To others. To the quiet voices I used to dismiss. It's too late for us. But it's not too late for me. Daniel walked his date to her car. You okay? She asked. You seemed distracted after you saw that woman. I'm fine, he said. That was my ex-wife. Oh. She paused. Is it weird seeing her? Daniel considered. Not weird. Just complete. Like finishing a book. You close it, put it on the shelf, and remember it taught you something. What did she teach you? He smiled. That I was right to protect what I built, and that some people will only see your value after they've lost it. She squeezed his hand. Their loss. Exactly. They reached her car. Coffee this weekend? She asked. I'd like that. She drove away. Daniel stood in the parking lot. Not thinking about the past. Just present. Exactly where he'd always been. If this story hit different, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Let me know what you learned from Daniel and Jiwoo's story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Sometimes the quietest lessons are the loudest truths. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.